Dear friends, I wish to warn you about a new crime ring that is targeting business travelers. This ring is well organized, well funded, and has very skilled personnel and is currently in most major cities. The crime begins when a business traveler goes to a lounge for a drink at the end of the workday. A person in the bar walks up as they sit alone and offers to buy them a drink. The last thing the traveler remembers until they wake up in a hotel room bathtub, their body submerged to their neck in ice, is sipping that drink. There is a note taped to the wall instructing them not to move and to call 911. A phone is on a small table next to the bathtub for them to call. The business traveler calls 911, who have become quite familiar with this crime. The business traveler is instructed by the 911 operator to very slowly and carefully reach behind them and feel if there is a tube protruding from their lower back. The business traveler finds a tube and answers, yes. The 911 operator tells them to remain still, having already sent paramedics to help. The operator knows that both of the business traveler's kidneys have been harvested. This is not a scam, or out of a science fiction novel. It is real. There was a woman who lived in a small house in the suburbs of a big city. She wasn't married and lived alone, with only her big dog to keep her company. The dog was a Doberman. One evening, the woman came home from work and found her dog choking on something. It was lying on the living room floor and gasping for air. The woman dropped her purse and tried to clear her dog's throat, but she had no luck. Concerned about the animal's welfare, she immediately loaded her pet into the car and drove him to the nearest vet's office. The vet examined the Doberman right away and said he would probably have to operate in order to remove the obstruction in the dog's windpipe. He told the woman to go home and he'd call her later to let her know how things went. Meanwhile, the dog was still gasping for air and growing weaker by the minute. The flustered woman went straight home. As she was close to the front door behind her, she got a call on her cell phone. It was the vet and something seemed to be seriously wrong. "Listen carefully," he said in an urgent tone. "You need to get out of the house right now. Go to your neighbor's place and wait for the police to arrive. I've already called them. Go now." Shocked and frightened, the woman wasted no time and ran straight out the front door. A few minutes later, a police car arrived with its siren blaring. The policemen got out and explained that they had to search the house. They entered through the front door with their guns drawn. The woman was speechless. She had no idea what was happening. She called the vet and asked him what was going on. "I managed to clear the obstruction in your dog's throat," he said. "When I found out what he was choking on, I called the police. Your dog was choking on 3 human fingers." After the police searched the place, they found a masked man in the woman's bedroom closet. He was armed with a knife and cowering in pain, clutching his right hand. The dog had bitten off 3 of his fingers. Every child fears under their bed. If they don't, they fear the closet, or maybe that little crack in the almost closed door. Scientists know that children are more perceptive. They see things that adults don't. They aren't yet tethered into only accepting what society wants them to accept. They see what's truly there. They see monsters. If you were to borrow a child's eyes and see through them for a night, you would go insane. To be able to see what you only dimly remember, burrowing into your covers while wearing those train pajamas, hoping to a God you can barely comprehend that it doesn't see you back. It would drive an adult crazy, because adults forget the rules. Number 1, cover yourself. If you can't see it, it can't see you, even if it makes it harder to breathe. Number 2, don't make a noise. Every whimper can lead to destruction. Number 3, don't move. It attracts their attention. Number 4, only light can make them go away. Bright light, flashlights make it worse. Teenagers are caught in the middle. They still feel what's there, but they cannot see, and they forget the rules. Why do you think there's so many insomniacs typing at their computers, subconsciously praying the light from their monitor will be enough to keep them away? It's not. Now look behind you with a child's eyes, and try not to scream. A few months after my husband and I bought our house, we adopted a pit bull mix. She has some anxiety and fear around new people and with dogs, but we didn't know all of this when we adopted her. The way our house and yard is set up is that we have a galley kitchen leading into a sunroom with a back door going out onto a small deck. The deck has stairs down into our fenced-in yard. We live on a corner lot, so our backyard is behind the house and along the side. And on the other side of the fence, the sidewalk goes right along it, and there is a driveway that connects to the sidewalk behind our backyard fence. The driveway is shared with our next-door neighbor and the neighbor behind us. One night a few weeks after we got our dog, we were out in the yard playing fetch with her around 9 p.m. We hear someone walking down the sidewalk, and she barks because she has stranger danger about people walking. As she is barking, we see a set of keys fly over the fence into our yard. My husband yelled out, "Hey, you dropped your keys," and gets no response. We just hear the footsteps continue walking. We chat for a second and decide we will head inside because our dog is spooked, and we will just post about the keys on our neighborhood site so someone can claim them or return them to their owner. Once inside, I need to use the bathroom, and I prefer our upstairs bathroom, so I head upstairs while my husband heads through the kitchen to the living room to get back to his video games. As he's leaving the kitchen, he hears the back door open and shut, and then realizes I'm upstairs, so it can't be me. Our dog remained in the sunroom during all of this. He turns around and sees someone peeking out from behind the cabinets. There is about a 3-foot wall blocking the door from view at the other end of the kitchen that this man is hiding behind. He yells at the guy, "I see you," and walks further into the kitchen, and sees my dog is growling at the intruder and has him backed up against the door. The guy is pressed against the door trying to stay away from my dog, and my husband is yelling at the guy to get out of our house. The guy is not responding, so my husband asks him if the keys are his. The guy nods and my husband says, "Get out and you can have them." The guy finally goes out the door and my husband peeks through the glass on the door, and this guy is just sitting on our deck. He goes out there to try and have a conversation with the guy and asks him what he is doing and why he came into the house. He's pretty convinced the guy is on something since he seems out of it and isn't responding. The guy kept saying that he thought it was his friend Dave's house and that he's lost and doesn't look like people around here, so he was nervous. He told my husband that when our dog barked, he got scared and threw the keys and then followed us into our backyard and into the house. My husband offered to help the guy find Dave's house. We didn't know all the neighbors since we were newish too. And the guy wasn't even able to tell him the address or a phone number for this Dave person. My husband gives him the keys and watches him leave the yard and comes back inside, where blissfully unaware me just came back downstairs. He's explaining the situation to me, and as he's retelling me feels a bit uneasy about it, and he decides to go back outside to see if he can find the guy. Probably not his best idea, but he didn't think that the guy was intending to harm us. He finds the guy wandering the street out in the front of our house and tries asking him more questions. The guy only has the keys and some prescription bottles and continues rambling about his friend Dave, and is unable to tell my husband where his car is or where Dave lives. My husband asked him if our dog hurt him, and he said she did bite him, but there were no marks on his hand or anything, so it seemed like it was more of a warning shot to back off. He eventually realizes he's not going to get any more out of this guy and comes back inside, where we decide to call the police. Not really because we're worried about him coming back, but because he did not seem okay, and we live in a state where people 100% often have guns in their homes. So if he had wandered into another house, things could have played out very differently. We talked to the cops but never found out if they found him or what happened, but we always lock the back door when we come inside now. Reading other stories on here, it could have played out very differently and much worse, but having a drug-addled person throw their keys into your yard and then follow you in is a bit jarring, regardless of their intention. We felt very lucky to have our dog at that moment. I waved goodbye to my friends as I stepped off the bus and headed to my house. I was super excited to get home and see my parents. They hadn't talked much at all yesterday. As a matter of fact, they just stayed in their bedroom all day. They hadn't been feeling well. I ran up the stairs of the front porch and swung the front door open with a big cheesy grin on my face. However, when I opened the door, there was no one in the den. The television was off and the house seemed to be abnormally quiet. I took a step in and started calling out. "Mom? Dad?" I called. I knew they were supposed to be here. Dad had the day off and Mom didn't have any plans with her girlfriends until next week, right? I placed my backpack on the ground next to the couch and walked into the kitchen to check the calendar. October 5th. I was right. Dad took this day off so him, Mom, and I could go see a movie together. They've got to be here somewhere, I thought to myself. Then it hit me. School let out early today because of a busted water pipe. I looked at the watch on my wrist. It's only 12 o'clock. They may still be sleeping. I headed back through the den and slowly opened their bedroom door. Surely enough, there they lie. A sigh of relief escaped my mouth, and my grin returned. I tiptoed over to my mom's side of the bed and pulled the covers back. I was greeted with the same sight as the day before. She lay there motionless, eyes glazed over, mouth agape. Her skin was a pale white and her hair was beginning to thin. The soup I gave her yesterday sat on the bedside table. It was stale now, and she hadn't even touched it. I'm beginning to think they don't want to feel better. I placed the cover back over her head, grabbed the old soup, and left the room, slowly closing the door behind me. I decided not to wake either of them, considering they must need their sleep. I'm sure they'll be up for it tomorrow. Until then, I have a ton of psychology homework to be done. We're doing this paper on people who have some type of disorder causing them to live in denial of something, even some of the most obvious things. I couldn't imagine living like that. Have you ever had the feeling that you're being watched? I'm sure you have. Everyone has had this feeling. It doesn't matter if you're old or young. You're being watched all the time. It will be lurking around your house, around places you often go to. People will call you crazy. Maybe you are. Maybe you're not. But I can tell that this person is real. I'm sure you all think I'm crazy, but I'm not. Because after all, your sanity is the only thing that keeps things away. When you lose your sanity, it'll eat you alive. Not from the outside like some kind of cannibal. It will eat you from the inside out, starting with your brain, ending with your soul. When it reaches your soul, your life will slowly fade away. The fastest option is to kill yourself. If you don't commit suicide, your life will pass slowly, very slowly. Seconds will feel like minutes. Minutes will feel like hours and hours. Hours will feel like days. When you feel like a week has passed, while you sit in a darkened room waiting for the end, you will see that you only sat there for 12 hours. You will probably have a mental breakdown, and you scream for someone to end this. That's the sign for this thing to start. Its horrible hobby. He will walk into your room, staring at you with a freezing look. The longer you stare in its eyes, the weaker you get. You can't scream, can't move, you can't even breathe. Just when you think you're gonna die, he will come closer with his face, saying, "Boo." You will pass out and wake up in a hospital. You have been cut up, and the people at the hospital are stunned by the fact you survived all of this. A doctor walks to you. He grabs you by the throat and starts choking you. He will come close with his face, saying, "Boo." That will be the last thing you will remember, as you will slip into a coma. No one can save you. You will slowly die, suffering. You're probably wanting to know how I know this. Well, I'm one of its victims. The first one who didn't go insane, and now I'm telling the world about this. So, the next time you feel like you're being watched, run for your life and don't ever look back. Brother dear, today's the day. Why, sister dear, what's that you say? You promised me that we'd go out. What's this you're going on about? To play with other girls and boys. But sister dear, they're not your toys. No, silly brother, at the park. But sister dear, it's getting dark. Oh, of course, my dear, that time's the best. They'll all be going home to rest. That's why I like to join the fun. In the dark, they'll have to run. I'm the best at hide and seek. Along the monkey bars you'll creep. And when I catch them, I can't wait. Such a young and gruesome fate. If I'm lucky, they'll be slow. All it takes is one swift blow. Tumbling down the seesaw blade. We'll see if any take the bait. One or two I'll leave for last. Kill them slow, I'll kill them fast. Well, brother dear, that all depends. Whether or not they're both your friends. If they're my friends, I'll kill them first. And treat the snobby brats the worst. I'll make them suffer, sob, and bleed. Thus ignorance should further breed. I'll choke them, hang them from the slide. Against their skin my blade will glide. Don't bleed them out, dear, that's no fun. Would you rather use a gun? The nail gun, brother, why use that? It gives that satisfying splat. No, no, my dear, we can't be hasty. The metal makes the flesh more tasty. That may well be, but all the same, I know I'll play your game. I can't wait to hear them screaming. You're so cute when you're daydreaming. If we don't hurry, they won't be there. To lose our victims won't be fair. I'll get my shoes, my coat and hat. I'll bring my handy baseball bat. I can't wait, brother, we're on our way. We get to hear them scream today. One night, a middle-aged woman was sitting at home reading the newspaper. Her husband worked nights, which meant that she was often alone in the house. It was getting late and she was about to go to bed when she heard a strange noise outside. It sounded like a crying baby and seemed to be coming from the bushes outside her front door. She thought it was very weird, but was tempted to go out and investigate. Just then, her dog jumped to its feet and began barking and growling at the door. The woman got a strange and uneasy feeling. She stopped in her tracks and decided to call the police instead. When she told them she had heard the sound of a crying baby, the police said, "We'll be right over. Whatever you do, do not open your door." The lady hung up the phone, and minutes later she heard the sound of sirens as 2 police cars pulled into her driveway. One policeman banged on her door while the other searched the bushes outside her house. The woman opened her front door and let the policeman in. He was holding a doll in his arms, and she noticed that it had a tape recorder in its belly. The policeman pressed play on the tape recorder, and they both heard the sound of a baby crying. He explained that there was a serial killer on the loose who was targeting women who were alone at night. He was using a cunning trick to fool the woman into opening their front doors and coming outside. He would hide in the bushes and play a tape of a baby crying. The recording of the baby's cries would make the woman think there was a child in need of help, and they would come out of their homes. While they were looking for the source of the cries, the killer would emerge from the bushes and murder them. He said that in the past few days they had received several calls from women saying that they heard a crying baby outside their homes when they were alone at night. The serial killer had already murdered 2 women in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and if it hadn't been for her dog warning her of the danger, she might have become his next victim. There was a middle-aged woman who was very fat and desperately wanted to lose weight. She had tried all sorts of fad diets, but none of them seemed to work. Exercise was out of the question because she was just too lazy and she lacked the willpower to force herself to eat less. One day she was leafing through a magazine when she came across an advertisement for diet pills. "Guaranteed weight loss in just 2 weeks," said the ad. The company was selling the diet pills over the internet, so the woman decided to order a month's supply. A few days later, she received a package in the mail. When she opened it, she was surprised to see that it only contained 12 large pills. The instructions said that she should take 1 pill per month with a glass of water, and afterwards she should avoid eating spicy food or drinking alcohol. The woman popped the diet pill into her mouth and swallowed it down. A few days later, she noticed that her appetite had completely disappeared. She didn't feel hungry at all, and even though she didn't do any exercise, she was beginning to shed the pounds. As the days went on, she began quickly losing more and more weight. Within no time, she was admiring her slim new body in the mirror. The change was stunning. She had gone from a pear shape to an hourglass figure in no time at all. Unfortunately, the diet pills proved to be more effective than she had expected. Even though she was down to her target weight, she continued to get thinner and thinner. Soon, she was feeling tired and weak, and she had sharp abdominal pains. The pain finally became so intense that she was forced to go to the hospital. A doctor examined her and became alarmed. After taking an x-ray of her stomach, he asked her if she'd eaten anything strange lately. "No," replied the woman. "I've barely eaten anything at all since taking my new diet pills." The doctor asked to see the bottle of pills. He broke 1 capsule open and brought the contents down to the laboratory to be analyzed. When he returned, he had some bad news for the woman. The diet pills contained the eggs of a tapeworm. One night, there was a teacher at an elementary school in Japan who was working long hours and decided it was time to go home. It was 8 p.m. and it was time to close the school. So he packed his bags and left. He was about to lock the gate when he saw a group of dark figures in the distance. They were on the football field. It looked as though it was a group of boys kicking a ball back and forth. "Hey, what are you doing there?" shouted the teacher. "Come on, it's time to go home. I have to lock up." The boys continued playing and paid no attention to him. "Don't pretend you can't hear me," shouted the teacher angrily. "The school is closed. Quickly now, go out the gate." Just then, one of the figures kicked the football high into the air. It landed onto the grass and came rolling over to the teacher. When it stopped at his feet, he looked down, and the blood suddenly drained from his face. He was overcome with horror. It wasn't a football. It was a severed head. A long time ago, there was a man who went out hunting in the woods. As night fell, he found himself in an unfamiliar part of the forest. He walked and walked, but he couldn't find his way home. Wandering aimlessly in the dark, he eventually came to a small clearing where an old, ramshackle cabin stood. Tired and weary, he decided to see if he could stay the night. When he came closer to the cabin, he saw that the door was standing ajar. Poking his head inside, he could see that the little cabin was completely empty, but there was a bed and a fire burning in the fireplace. The hunter threw himself on the bed and decided to sleep there for the night. If the owner came back, he would ask his permission in the morning. Lying on the bed, half asleep, he looked around and was surprised to see the walls were covered with paintings. They appeared to be family portraits, all framed and painted in incredible detail. They seemed very lifelike and, without exception, each family portrait was uglier than the next. The hideous faces in the paintings made him incredibly uneasy. The way they were painted made it seem as if the eyes were staring directly at him. It was incredibly unnerving. He decided that the only way he was going to get any sleep was to ignore the hideous faces staring at him. So he turned on his side, facing the wall, pulled the blanket over his head and drifted off to sleep. In the morning, the hunter woke up to find the cabin bathed in sunlight. When he looked up, he discovered there were no family portraits on the walls, just windows. It's nearing sundown and a traveling salesman is driving along an old 2-lane highway south of here, looking for a cheap motel to stay the night. Approaching an intersection, he spies a young woman in a lavender gown standing to the side of the road. He stops and asks her if she needs a ride. The girl is very grateful and tells him that she's been abandoned by her date for the senior prom and just wants to go home. It's a chilly night, so the salesman lets her wear his sweater. He drives her to the address she has given him, drops her off at the front door of the house, and heads back out onto the highway. A short while later, remembering his sweater, he returns to the house and rings the bell. The girl's mother answers and tearfully informs the driver that her daughter was killed in an automobile accident at the very place where he'd picked up the apparition, exactly 1 year before, on the night of her senior prom. He makes his way to the graveyard and finds her grave. His sweater is laying atop of it, neatly folded. A few years ago, there was a middle-aged woman who was very vain and would always wear her hair up in a big bun. She was very proud of her hairdo and thought she was the most fashionable of all her friends. She had no idea that her hairstyle had gone out of fashion years before. The woman was very lazy and didn't like having to spend time cleaning and styling her hair. Instead, she just left her hair as it was and never took it down at all. In fact, she never even bothered to wash it. Whenever she took a shower, she would wear a shower cap to make sure the water didn't mess up her hairstyle. At night, she would sleep with a towel wrapped around her hair to make sure nothing moved out of place. After a while, her hair began to smell. To mask the odor, she just put hairspray on it. When her scalp started to feel itchy, she put more hairspray on it. Even though her head itched like crazy, all she did was apply more hairspray. One morning, when she didn't come down for breakfast, her husband went up to the bedroom to wake her up. To his horror, he discovered that his wife had died during the night. At first, the police thought she must have had a heart attack in her sleep, because there wasn't a mark on her body. However, when the coroner was conducting an autopsy, he couldn't figure out what had killed her. Then, he examined her hair and found something horrendous. A black widow spider had made its nest in her hair and laid eggs. When the baby spiders hatched, they had bitten through her skull and eaten into her brain. The legend of Bloody Mary and the terrible fate she inflicts on those foolish enough to summon her has been around in one form or another for hundreds of years. Sometimes the evil spirit is known as Mary Worth, Hell Mary, Mary White, or Mary Jane. Her tale emerged from British folklore in the 1700s and took on new life with the advent of the internet. Is there any truth? So this is Mary's story. Chain letters have been circulating online since the 1990s when email first became popular. In some versions of the story, the ghost of Mary kills anyone who summons her. In other versions, she merely scares the wits out of them. This version was one of the first to appear online in 1994. When I was about 9 years old, I went to a friend's for a birthday party. This birthday party was also a slumber party. There were about 10 other girls there. About midnight, we decided to play some Mary Worth. Some of us had never heard of this, so one of the girls told the story. Mary Worth lived a long time ago. She was a very beautiful young girl. One day, she had a terrible accident that left her face so disfigured that nobody would look at her. She had not been allowed to see her own reflection after this accident for fear that she would lose her mind. Before this, she had spent long hours admiring her beauty in her bedroom mirror. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, unable to fight the curiosity any longer, she broke down into terrible screams and sobs as soon as she saw her face. It was at this moment that she was so heartbroken and wanted her old reflection back. She walked into the mirror to find it, vowing to disfigure anyone that came looking for her in the mirror. After hearing this story, which was told very scarily, we decided to turn out all the lights and try it. We all huddled around the mirror and started repeating, "Mary Worth, Mary Worth. I believe in Mary Worth." About the 7th time we said it, one of the girls that was in front of the mirror started screaming and trying to push her way back away from the mirror. She was screaming so loud that my friend's mom came running into the room. She quickly turned on the lights and found this girl huddled in the corner screaming. She turned her around to see what the problem was and saw these long fingernail scratches running down her right cheek. I will never forget her face as long as I live. A man was awakened by a clap of thunder. He lay in bed, looking at the shadows cast in his darkened bedroom. He was looking at the mirror on his bedroom wall when suddenly a flash of lightning illuminated the room. The man was terrified. For a split second, he had seen faces staring at him from inside the mirror. Their eyes blackened, their mouths hanging open. Unsettled by the weird apparition, he was unable to sleep for the rest of the night. His mind kept replaying the memory of those disturbing faces staring at him intently. The next morning, he removed the mirror from his bedroom wall and locked it in a storage room. The next night, he slept like a baby. Days passed and the memory of those horrible faces began to fade. One morning he woke up and went into the bathroom to take a shower. He got out of the shower and was drying himself with a towel when he happened to look up at the bathroom mirror. The steam from the shower had fogged up the mirror and revealed a message written in the moisture. It read, "Please return the mirrors. We miss watching you sleep at night." A man was taking a shower in his bathroom. He was reaching for the towel when he saw something in the bathroom mirror. It was a strange shadow, and soon as he laid eyes on it, it darted out of his line of vision. He stared at the mirror for a while, trying to figure out what he had seen. When he began to dry himself again, out of the corner of his eye, he saw another shadow flickering past in the mirror. He walked towards the mirror, put his hand against the glass, and began rubbing it. When his wife arrived home later that evening, he was nowhere to be found. After searching the house from top to bottom, calling her husband's name, she became very worried. The only trace she could find of him was a wet towel lying on the bathroom floor. She phoned the police and reported her husband missing. 2 days later, the man's wife disappeared too. It appeared that she had just suddenly vanished. The clothes she had been wearing that day were lying on the bedroom floor, and the shower in the bathroom was still running. Police found her handprint on the bathroom mirror. Neither the man nor his wife have been seen since. Somewhere in America, there is a house that at one time was owned by a family of 5. Nobody really knows what happened to them. Their neighbors said that they were a completely normal family. One night, loud noises were heard coming from the house. When the neighbors came to investigate the strange sounds, they found all of the windows locked and all of the curtains drawn. The following day, the house was empty. Since then, nobody has lived in that house, but some people have gone inside. In every bedroom, there is a mirror facing the corner of the room. If you turn the mirror around, it won't show your reflection. The area you'll be standing in will be inexplicably empty. They say that on rare occasions, you will catch a glimpse of the person who used to sleep in that room, horribly mutilated and bandaged from head to toe. One night, a woman was brushing her teeth before going to bed. Looking into the mirror, she noticed there were smudges all over it. Looking closer, she saw that it was covered in fingerprints. She took a towel and tried to rub them off. No matter how hard she tried cleaning the mirror, the fingerprints would not disappear. Upon closer inspection, she realized that the fingerprints were on the other side of the glass. As a man got out of the shower in the house that he owned, he saw a child's handprint on the steamed glass of the mirror. The man lived in the house by himself. Frightened, he tried to wipe the handprint off, only to find out that the print was on the other side of the mirror. A man woke up one morning to find a note taped to his bathroom mirror. "Don't worry, I took care of everything," it read. His clothes had been freshly laundered, his bathroom was spotless, and his garage had been organized. Even his old, rusty toolbox had been replaced with a shiny new one. Later that week, there was another note on his bathroom mirror. It read, "Get out of town." Besides the sink, he found several grainy photos of police officers in a taped-off section of a field. One of them was wearing latex gloves, and he was examining an old rusty toolbox. Mirror, they copy your every move, your every step, your every expression. They are out to get you. They're waiting for you to make a mistake. They are the evil you. You shouldn't trust the mirror. That mirror a mirror. It's the evil you, the opposite. They say if you chant certain words, it'll come out. You could come into their world. Mirror world, the opposite world, underworld. But only under one condition: you must do what they ask. You must obey. Yes, there is another way, another option: death. Don't trust the mirror. Don't trust the mirror world, the underworld. Don't trust yourself. Years ago, there was a road that was known by the locals as the Never-Ending Road. Some say it was in California, while others maintain that it was in Alberta, Canada. It was a long, winding road, unlit and bordered by a thick forest that led through the mountains. According to legend, many people who drove down the road at night were never seen or heard from again. The legend of the Never-Ending Road became so well known that a lot of folks were even afraid to drive on it during daylight hours. Some drivers would even lose their nerve and turn back, terrified that if they continued along the road, they would never return. The road took a sharp turn at one point and curved around a large canyon. There were no guardrails on the turn, and on the other side of the canyon, the road continued. One summer, a work crew was widening the road where they made a gruesome discovery. One of the workmen pushed over a rock on the side of the canyon and heard it hit something metal. When they climbed down to look, the workmen found dozens of crashed cars at the bottom. They had all fallen victim to their doom, and the decomposing bodies and skeletal remains of the victims were still strapped into their seats. It was discovered that the roads on either side of the canyon lined up so well that when viewed from the correct angle, especially at night, it created an optical illusion. The canyon was almost invisible, and the road seemed to continue on up and over the hill on the other side of the canyon. People who drove down the road at night had no idea that there was a huge drop in front of them until it was too late, and they careened off the cliff and plummeted to their deaths. They say that local law enforcement hushed up the discovery, wanting to avoid a scandal, and the road was quietly closed down, never to be reopened. The corpses of the dead were never able to be recovered, and they still lie there to this day, in their twisted metal graves. There was a woman who went to Mexico on vacation. She got bored of hanging around the resort hotel and decided to explore the town. After doing a little shopping and buying a few souvenirs, she happened to see a little dog trotting down a dusty alley between two buildings. She was immediately smitten with the cute little animal and followed it. When she caught up to the dog, she picked it up and it started licking her face. The dog didn't have any collar or tags, so she assumed it was a stray. The animal was so adorable that she decided to adopt it. It's illegal to transport animals back from Mexico to the United States, so on the journey back home, she hid the little dog under her sweater and pretended that she was pregnant. The guards at the border crossing never suspected a thing. Back in the United States, she brought her new pet back to her apartment and gave it a bath. Then she set out a bowl of food for the little dog to eat. She laid out a blanket in the kitchen for the creature to sleep on, and then went out to a restaurant to have dinner. When she came home a few hours later and walked into the kitchen, she found her new pet chewing a hole through the wall. There was an oozing mucus around the animal's eyes, and it was foaming at the mouth. Afraid that her new pet might be sick, she wrapped it up in a blanket and let it sleep in her bedroom. The next morning, the woman woke up to find the creature gnawing on her ear. She screamed and pushed it away. The woman realized that her new pet was seriously ill and took it to the vet. She sat impatiently in his office, waiting for him to see her. As soon as the vet came out, the woman rushed over, carrying her pet in her arms. "There's something wrong with my dog," she said. He took one look at it and asked, "What did you say this was?" "I'm not sure what breed it is," she replied. "I think it's some kind of rare Mexican breed." The vet shook his head. "This is not a dog," he said. "This is a sewer rat." The woman was horrified. "A sewer rat?" she cried. "Yes," said the vet, "but the bad news is, it has rabies." Any night around 10 or 11 p.m., take yourself to a flat, open area where you can walk in a straight line for 2 minutes or so without running into anything. Once there, face in the direction you plan to walk, with your arms at your sides and your hands relaxed. Close your eyes and take a deep breath. At precisely 11:09 and 20 seconds, start walking. Be sure to take one step every second, no more, no less. Do not open your eyes and do not hesitate. Count your steps in your head as you go. On the 111th step, say the word 1 out loud and stop. Your breath will catch in your throat and your hair will stand on end. For the next 10 seconds, you will be unable to move a single muscle in your body, no matter how hard you try. After these 10 seconds, you will be able to move and breathe again. However, you will then start to feel the sensation of cold metal claws seizing each of your fingers by the base and plucking them clean off your hand. It will not hurt. You will surely be horrified, but do not open your eyes and do not move. If you move or open your eyes, all that anyone will find of you is your 2 fingerless hands, severed cleanly at the wrist. Once the claws have stopped and all of your fingers have been plucked off, stay still for another 10 seconds. It may help to count. After these 10 seconds have passed, you may open your eyes. You will find that your fingers are still quite firmly attached to your hands. Go home immediately and go directly to bed. Speak to no one for the rest of the night and enter no building that you do not consider your home. The next day you will have become one of them. Once per day, as long as there is even a sliver of sunlight, you may point at someone and speak the word 1. That night, he will face the same trial that you faced. If you see that person the next day, you will know that he, too, has become one of them. If not, then do not be alarmed if you do not feel hungry the rest of the day. One night, a teenage girl went to a nightclub with her friends. They had a great time, drinking and dancing, and it was 3 a.m. by the time they left. Her friends lived in the city, but the girl lived in the suburbs. They said goodbye and went back to their apartment, leaving the girl to make her own way home. Unable to get a taxi, the teenage girl decided to walk home on her own. On the way, she had to cross through a park. It was very dark, and all she could hear was the clanking of her heels echoing in the night. She thought she saw something move in the bushes, so she quickened her pace. Suddenly, a man appeared from behind a bush and blocked her path. His face was hideous. It looked terribly scarred and misshapen. She tried to run, but he cornered her and grabbed hold of her arms. The frightened girl pleaded for her life and tearfully asked to be let go. The man's deformed mouth twisted into a leering grin. "Do you want death or smiley face?" he asked. "Please, just let me go," she cried. Death or smiley face? He insisted. The girl didn't know what he meant. Smiley face, she replied. Without a word, he pulled out his knife and sliced the corners of the girl's mouth up to her ears. Her face was left completely deformed. She was scarred for life. When other people saw her in public, they said she resembled a grotesque smiley face. There was a woman who bought a pet snake. It was a 12-foot-long Burmese python. She lived alone in a small house with her young son and kept the snake in a tank in the living room. The pet snake had a habit of escaping from its tank. After a while, the woman began to feel guilty about keeping such a large reptile in such a small, confined space. She would often take the snake out of its tank and allow it to roam freely about the house. Her little son loved the pet snake and often brought it out to the garden to play with it. One morning, the woman noticed that the pet snake had stopped eating. 3 days passed and the snake still hadn't touched any of its food. The woman began to get worried that there was something wrong with the snake, so she picked up the phone and called the vet. Is it normal for a snake to suddenly stop eating? She asked. It depends, said the vet. In the wild, snakes often have to survive for long periods without food. Sometimes they starve themselves in preparation for a huge meal. Pet snakes can also get bored with what you're feeding them. They like a change of food now and again. The woman took the vet's advice and bought a new type of food for her pet, but the snake still refused to eat anything. Not long afterwards, the woman woke up in the middle of the night to find her pet snake lying in bed beside her. It was sleeping, stretched out completely straight on the bed. Thinking this was a little strange, she picked it up and put it back in the tank. A few days later, her son was playing with the snake in the garden. The woman was washing dishes in the kitchen when she happened to glance out the window. Her son was laying down on the grass. The snake was lying next to him, stretched out and stiff as a board. The woman became convinced that the snake was dying. She immediately grabbed the phone to call the vet again. My pet snake still isn't eating, she said. I don't think there's anything to worry about, replied the vet. Just keep an eye on it, and if it isn't eating by the end of the month, bring it into my office. There's something else, said the woman. The other night I found it laying in bed beside me. It was stretched out straight and totally rigid. Oh no, said the vet with alarm. You'll have to get rid of the snake as soon as possible. It'll have to be put down. Why? What's wrong with it? Asked the woman. That's what snakes do when they're measuring you, he said. Measuring me? She asked. It was sizing you up in order to eat you, he replied. The horrified woman turned and looked out the window just in time to see her little son's feet disappearing down the snake's throat. First one was a couple weeks ago. It was just an unmarked DVD in a paper sleeve, addressed to me without a return. I figured it was some kind of spam mail and tossed it out. Ain't nobody got time for that. The second one was getting ready to romance the trash too, but it happened to arrive the day I bought a used Xbox. I wanted to test out the DVD player and didn't have anything else handy, so I popped it in and let it play. The footage was a bit fuzzy and shaky, like someone was walking while they recorded. It showed me entering my apartment building, following me until I get into the elevator. I even looked right at the camera for a second, but racking my brain, I couldn't remember noticing anything strange. There was a voiceover too, but it was in German, and I couldn't make sense of it. I started it over and watched it again, only about 15 seconds. It wasn't so much creepy as surreal. I was honestly more bothered by how terrible my posture looked than I was about someone recording me. Probably some kid showing off his new camera or something. The world is full of weirdos, right? The third one rattled me though. The video showed me in the grocery store, wandering up and down the aisle, looking for something. About 10 seconds again, more German voiceover. This wasn't someone innocently playing with their phone in the lobby anymore. I was being actively followed. I threw it away immediately. Regretting it and digging it out of the trash a couple minutes later, I had to get this thing translated so I can figure out what the hell was going on. The next day I shuffled through my mail like crazy looking for another DVD. Nothing came, or the next day, or the one after that. Getting it translated fell further and further down my to-do list, until a week or so later I'd practically forgotten about it. Until yesterday anyway. When another paper-sleeved slipped out from between some junk mail and landed on my floor. I rushed to play it, re-getting it from the very first frame. The screen was panning around my room, my bedroom. It was dark, but everything had a green night vision tint. The camera focused on the bed and started to approach. It took me a few seconds to recognize the lump in the dark. It was recording me while I slept. A hand reached out from behind the camera, pale thin, hairless hand, with skin stretched too tight across the bones, and the digits were wrong, 4 to each finger. And double jointed, moving so fluidly they might as well have been tentacles. It rested a long finger on my forehead, trailing down my nose, over my lips, brushing so soft that I couldn't tell whether it was touching at all. Something in German again. A sing-song voice barely above a whisper. It was longer this time, but I paused to keep going back until I could write down every word as I close, as I could hear it. I watched the rest of the video before I translated anything. He stayed beside me for a long time, but I didn't want to fast forward because I was afraid of missing some crucial dialogue. I stared at it, staring at me for almost an hour before I couldn't take it anymore. The camera had been still for a long time and I hadn't heard or seen any other sign of the perpetrator. I decided even if something else did happen that night, then I'd prefer not to know. I rummaged around until I found the elevator and the grocery store tapes too, writing down all the German from them to translate. After hacking my way through the spelling a few times, Google Translate gave me this. Tape number 1. I don't really know, I threw it out before I knew what it was. Tape 2. Me in the elevator. Look at him go. I can't believe he's going back into the apartment after what we told him last time. Tape 3. Me at the grocery store. Found him again. Look how calm he is. Just going about his life. Do you think he's seen it yet? Tape 4. Whispered while I slept. Sleep, baby, sleep. Thy father guards the sheep. Thy mother shakes the little trees. There falls down one little dream. Sleep, baby, sleep. Sleep, baby, sleep. The sky draws the sheep. The little stars are little lambs. The moon, the little shepherd. Sleep, baby, sleep. Sleep, baby, sleep. I shall bring your sheep, one with a golden bell, that shall be thy journeyman, to guide you safe to hell. That's it. I don't know whether this thing is trying to threaten me, or protect me, or what it could be trying to protect me from. Either way, I don't think I'm going to sleep tonight. I don't know what I would do if I woke up and saw that thing watching me, recording me, even touching me with its long, disjointed fingers. When the next DVD comes, if it comes, Maybe one of you can watch it for me and tell me what happened. I don't think I have the stomach to watch. A woman decides to take a trip to a tropical location. Her plan is to relax and get a suntan during the week that she's there. She spends the week lazing on numerous beaches, but on the last day she decides to take a tour through a forested area. While in the area, she happens upon a secluded waterfall and a quiet resting place, where she decides to take a swim and then dry off in the sun. The woman falls asleep while lying in the sun. When she wakes up, she's horribly frightened by a spider crawling on her cheek. She hurriedly brushes the spider away and carries on her way. A few weeks after returning home, the woman develops a cyst of sorts on her cheek. She goes to the emergency room where the doctor tells her that they will need to pop the cyst to let the fluid escape. The woman agrees to this simple and painless procedure. The doctor proceeds. As it's a painless procedure, the woman is not anesthetized. Soon after the doctor makes the first attempt to pop the cyst, the woman hears a gasp and then feels something trickling down her cheek. She assumes it's the fluid. The doctor tells her not to panic. Instinctively, she brings her hand up to her cheek to wipe off the fluid. At that point, she realizes that it's not fluid, but rather something crawling on her cheek. Spiders. Hundreds of tiny spiders are crawling all over her face and on her hand. She lets out a blood-curdling scream and totally loses it. She is so distraught and out of control that she needs to be restrained by several staff. To this date, she remains in the psychiatric ward of the same hospital where the procedure took place. One beautiful hot summer night, a teenage girl named Julie was swimming with her boyfriend in the family pool. They decided to go skinny dipping. Her boyfriend stood behind her and wrapped his arms around her. He kissed her shoulder and then they gazed at the night sky and dreamed of their future together. A few minutes later, they heard a strange noise that seemed to be coming from the bushes, but they were not paying much attention. They were so comfortable together. Just then, Julie turned her head to kiss her boyfriend, but she didn't see anything behind her. She twirled around and realized that her boyfriend's head was missing. It had been cut off. She screamed and his headless corpse sank to the bottom of the pool. In a panic, she scrambled out of the pool and ran inside the house to warn her parents. When she got to the kitchen, she came face to face with her stepfather, who was washing his bloody hands in the sink. There are many different kinds of chain letters, but all of them have the same basic purpose, namely to persuade readers to copy and share them with as many other people as possible. Some promise good luck, blessings, riches, or long life for passing them along. Others threaten misfortune, curses, poverty, or even death for naught. In this case, the threat is murder at the hands of the eyeless, bloody ghost of a 7-year-old child. Judging by how frequently this chain letter has been copied and shared, the ploy is extraordinarily effective. This was posted on Facebook, January 9th, 2013. Hi, I am Teddy. Once you read this, you cannot get out. Finish reading this until it is done. As I said, I am Teddy. I am 7 years old. I have no eyes and blood all over my face. I am dead. If you don't send this to at least 12 people, I will come to your house at midnight and I'll hide under your bed. When you're asleep, I'll kill you. Don't believe me? Case 1. Patty Buckles got this email. She doesn't believe in chain letters. Well, foolish Patty. She was sleeping when her TV started flickering on and off. Now she's not with us anymore. Ha ha, Patty. Ha ha. You don't want to be like Patty, do you? Case 2. George M. Simon. He hates chainmail, but he didn't want to die that night. He sent it to 4 people. Not good enough, George. Now George is in a coma. We don't know if he'll ever wake up. Haha, George. Haha. Now, do you want to be like George? Case 3. Valerie Tyler. She got this letter. Another chain letter, she thought. Only had 7 people to send to. Well, that night when she was having a shower, she saw Bloody Mary in the mirror. It was the biggest fright of her life. Valerie is scarred for life. Case 4. Derek Mintz. This is the final case I'll tell you about. Well, Derek was a smart person. He sent it to 12 people. Later that day, he found a $100 bill on the ground. He was promoted to head officer at his job, and his girlfriend said yes to his proposal. Now Katie and him are living happily ever after. They have 2 beautiful children. Send this to 12 people, or you'll face the consequences. 0 people, you'll die tonight. 1 to 6 people, you will be injured. 7 to 11 people, you will get the biggest fright of your life. 12 and over, you are safe and will have good fortune. Do what Teddy says. Hurry. You must send to 12 people before midnight. Every family in every town, in every country, on every continent has one. It's a cabinet, not particularly odd, not out of place. The paint was peeling a bit on the corners and the knob was a bit loose. The inside smelled like dust and the paint wasn't the same as the kitchen walls. You hid in there once during a game of hide and seek. No one told you it doesn't open back into your reality. Don't worry, you can't tell the difference, but everyone misses you. There was a little boy who was afraid of everything. He had an intense fear of his bedroom closet. Every night when he went to bed, he was terrified. His parents asked him what was wrong, and he told them he was afraid that there was a monster living in his closet. The boy's older brother decided to prove that nothing to fear in that closet. One night he got inside the closet and shut the door from behind him. A few seconds later, the young boy heard terrible cries and screams coming from the closet. At first, he was frightened, but then he realized that his older brother was just playing a prank on him. A minute later, the cries ceased and the room was filled by an eerie silence. Cautiously, the boy approached the closet and slowly opened the door. There was nobody inside. A pretty woman was serving a life sentence in prison for murder. Angry and resentful about her situation, she decided that she couldn't spend her life in prison. She began plotting ways to escape from the jail. She became good friends with one of the prison caretakers. His job was to bury any prisoners who died in a graveyard just outside the prison walls. Whenever a prisoner died, the caretaker rang a bell, which was heard by all the prison inmates. The caretaker then got the body and put it in a casket. Next, he entered his office to fill out the death certificate before returning to the casket to nail the lid shut. Finally, he put the casket on a wagon to take it to the graveyard and bury it. Knowing this routine, the woman devised an escape plan and shared it with the caretaker. The next time the bell rang, the woman would leave her cell and sneak into the dark room where the coffins were kept. She would slip into the coffin with the dead body while the caretaker was filling out the death certificate. When the caretaker returned, he would nail the lid shut and take the coffin outside the prison with the woman in the coffin along with the dead body. He would then bury the coffin. The women knew there would be enough air for her to breathe until later in the evening when the caretaker would return to the graveyard under cover of darkness, dig up the coffin, and set her free. The caretaker was reluctant to go along with this plan, but since he and the woman had become good friends over the years, he agreed to do it. The woman waited several weeks for one of the other prison inmates to die. One night, she was asleep in her cell when she heard the death bell ringing. She got up, picked the lock of her cell, and slowly walked down the hallway. She was nearly caught a couple times. Her heart was beating fast. She opened the door to the darkened room where the coffins were kept. Quietly, in the dark, she found the coffin that contained the dead body, carefully climbed into it and pulled the lid shut to wait for the caretaker to come and nail the lid down. Soon she heard footsteps and the pounding of the hammer and nails. Even though she was very uncomfortable in the coffin with the dead body beneath her, she knew that with each nail she was one step closer to freedom. The coffin was lifted onto the wagon and taken outside to the graveyard. She could feel the coffin being lowered into the ground. She didn't make a sound as the coffin hit the bottom of the grave with a thud. Finally, she heard the dirt dropping on top of the wooden coffin, and she knew that it was only a matter of time until she would be free at last. After several minutes of absolute silence, she began to chuckle to herself quietly. Feeling curious, she decided to light a match to find out the identity of the dead prisoner beside her. To her horror, she discovered that she was laying on top of the dead caretaker. During a wedding reception of a young couple, the guests decided on a drunken game of hide and seek. It was decided that the groom was it, and he eventually found everyone but his new bride. Eventually, the man became furious and decided it wasn't funny anymore, and he left her there. As the weeks went by, he accepted that she'd had second thoughts and went on with her life, so he did the same. A few years later, a cleaning lady dusted off an old trunk in the attic of the building where the reception had taken place. Out of curiosity, she opened it. Inside the trunk was the rotted body of the missing bride, who apparently became locked in the trunk she'd hidden. Whether she suffocated or starved was unknown, but her face was frozen in a scream. You were out of town for the weekend. When you came back to your apartment, your mailbox was stuffed full, at least 30 letters. Letters with no return address. Several of them felt soggy and heavy, as though they were recently wet, or perhaps contained a liquid. All of the letters have your name and address written on them, and many of them had your name scratched all over them in red ink. They don't smell nice. They smell like rotting meat and old garbage, and you're reluctant to take them back to your room, but curiosity gets the better of you. You manage to cart them all back to your room. You dump them in your kitchenette sink because you don't want them smelling up the rest of the apartment. You grab one that doesn't seem damp and isn't covered with writing and open it up. There's pictures inside, pictures of people you don't know, with their eyes torn out, teeth missing, unhinged jaws hanging open, throats ripped out. You're horrified, and yet you can't help but wonder what's in the rest of the letters. You open more and more to discover increasingly gruesome photos of dead people. Piles of body with limbs missing, displayed open corpses on operating tables with their vital organs removed, hang bodies that had been gutted and bled dry. Some of the soggy letters had blood and other fluids in them. The more letters you open, the more you notice that not all the people are strangers. Some of them were people you see at work, other people you went to high school with. By the time you get to the last few letters, the pictures of our mutilated bodies of your close friends and family members. Eventually, you reach the last letter. You don't want to know what's in it, but it's not like you have a choice now. You peel the letter open, and it's a picture of yourself. Not dead, eyes intact, no limbs missing. It's a picture of you entering your apartment building earlier that day, shortly before you collected your disgusting letters. As you hear a door elsewhere in your apartment open, you black out. A woman kept having recurring dreams in which a masked man was trying to kill her. The mask was very distinctive. It was spiked at the top with no eye holes, and it had a large zipper across the mouth. The mask was made of leather. One night, she had another nightmare. In the dream, she looked out her bedroom window and saw the masked man walking up to her in her garden path and towards her front door. She awoke from the nightmare, trembling with fear. Suddenly, she heard the doorbell ring. She grabbed her nightgown and ran downstairs. Cautiously, she opened the front door. There was nobody there. She looked down and saw the leather mask laying on the doorstep. There is an old hotel that has been around for hundreds of years. If you stay in room 6, you will find yourself in an unknown place, where exactly at 12:16 a.m. the power will go out and you'll be thrust into utter darkness. If you choose to stay awake, nothing will happen beyond that. But if you so much as close your eyes and fall asleep, you will find yourself in an unimaginable pit of despair, where creatures of fathomless shapes and sizes roam. You will be trapped here for hours until the sun comes up. It is rumored that this room is a gate into hell, and that the demons use the condensed evil of the room to escape into our reality through our minds. Those who have stayed in there rarely speak of it, for even recalling the night will put them into an uncontrollable frenzy. The policeman sat on the sofa with his pen and notebook in his hands. The old lady came in with a cup of tea and set it down on the table in front of him. "Before you take me down to the station, perhaps I should tell you why I did it, officer," she said. "The truth is, it was mostly for the company. It gets very lonely when you're an old lady and young people never seem to want to spend any time with me. I enjoy just sitting and talking." The policeman stared at her impassively. "Mrs. Ordway was the very first," she said as she sat down in her comfy armchair. "I remember it like it was yesterday. She came to my door selling beauty products. I invited her inside and made her a cup of tea. I went to the kitchen and fetched my axe. Then, when she least suspected it, I crept up behind her and chopped off her head. The next one was Mr. Bilgeman. He was a plumber and he came to fix my leaky pipes. When he was taking a break from his work, I made him a cup of tea. Then I took my axe out from behind the sofa and chopped off his head too. The third one was the paper boy, little Jimmy Watkins. I told him to come inside while I looked for my purse. He didn't drink tea, so I gave him a plate full of cookies. Children can't resist cookies. While he was munching away on the cookies, I began chopping with my axe, and his head came off as well. I stuffed all the heads and placed them on my mantelpiece. I talked to them. Day and night, I carry on conversations with them. It helps with the loneliness. The only problem was what to do with the bodies. I couldn't stuff them all. It would have been too much work. So I came up with an ingenious solution. What did I do? It was simple. I stuffed one of the bodies and used it for all of the heads. When I was tired of talking to one of them, I would take off the head, put it back on the mantelpiece, and put another head on the body. Isn't that clever? The policeman didn't answer. "Well, I'm getting a little bored with our conversation, officer," the old lady said with a sigh. She stood up, took off the policeman's head, and put it back on the mantelpiece. Then she took down the saleswoman's head and placed it on the body. "Oh, good afternoon, Miss Ordway," she said. "It's so nice to see you again. How have you been?" You know that ringing sound that you will perceive when you are in a very quiet area? Some people say this is an auditory illusion brought about the ear's inability to detect frequencies below the threshold of the human senses. This is completely wrong. That ringing covers up something else altogether. If you are quick, patient, and maybe a little lucky, you will be able to hear past the ringing. What you will hear are voices whispering to each other. They will silence themselves quickly, but with practice you will become more adept at catching and interpreting what they are saying. You will hear things of the past, the present, and the future. However, you must be careful, because there is no such thing as a voice without a body. And when you start noticing them, they will start noticing you. Next time when you're laying in bed and the moon is new, when you're at the moment where you're almost asleep and your eyes are closing, try listening for the sounds. More specifically, sounds that shouldn't exist in our realm. At this point, you'll notice the world around you change, but don't you dare open your eyes or make any movements. If you lay right where you are with your eyes closed, you'll feel something trace a finger, a claw, or perhaps something even worse across your forehead. The moment it stops tracing, you'll wake up and it'll be morning. Within that new week, you will die. However, depending on what was traced on your head, you'll either enter a paradise of a world, or you'll enter an evil world of torture. So, do you want to find out what's on the other side? You don't know it, but someone has been removed from your life. They haven't died. They haven't moved. They have simply ceased to be from present future and history. However, you still know they were there. You faintly recall broken memories of someone else there. Someone who should have been there, but you think you're crazy. You go to do something, but you can't remember what. It was them. They wanted to talk to you. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. But I've been just plain creepy, and I'll catch you in the next video.